Diamond, Diamond.
A precious gem of the most valuable kind. When pure, it is clear.
Diamond, Diamond.
A family name bringing traditions of love, hard work, and moral values.
This is the Diamond Education Podcast with my mom and dad, Johnny and Kelly England.
Welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast with your host, John and Kelly England. We're here to help you find the most valuable education for your child.
We are excited to have Paul and Jevonne Tanner, who are the founders of Choice Academy in Bountiful, Utah. They founded Choice Academy in 2020. Jevonne worked in public schools for 5 years as a biology teacher before founding their school. Paul realized early in his college life that a personalized education would be the best education for him. Working with BYU, he created a personalized degree program. He desires his children to find their passions in education and to pursue them earlier than he did in their life. So Paul and Jevonne, welcome to the Diamond Education Podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for what you do too.
Yeah, we're excited. This has been a fun experience for the two of us as we kind of get to know other people who are kind of pursuing education and doing things differently. So we like to always begin with the question, what is education?
I would say that education is preparing in its most simplest form. It's preparing for your future. And so that's going to look different for every person and at every different stage of our life. But for me and for my children, I'd say it's preparing for your future.
Yeah.
So that's emotionally and mentally and what you can do. That's how I would define education.
What led you guys to begin Choice Academy?
So I was a public high school teacher for 5 years. I had my master's in biology education, and I loved the interactions with the students that I had at the time. When I was teaching, I loved that part of it. I always felt like my hands were tied, and there were some really critical components that I felt like my students were missing that I wasn't allowed to do anything about. It wasn't any fault of teachers or administrations. It was a system. Everyone's hands were kind of tied.
Yeah.
I didn't think much of it. And when our kids were old enough, we just put them in public schools because that's what we did and that's what I did. And as soon as our oldest started, I kind of went, whoa, this isn't what I bargained for. This isn't what I was wanting. But I didn't really know there were other options. So we kept going for 5 years. So my first 4 started in public schools, and I'm super grateful for what they learned there, and I'm super grateful for public schools. I think they play a great role. It wasn't a great fit for our family. My kids did great academically. They were like the top of their class, all of them were, but they each had something that was missing. One of them would come home crying because her legs hurt from sitting so long. One of them was bored, silly, and was kind of told they just had to sit and wait, and they couldn't read further, and they had to do dot to dots in math. Another one would cry because she couldn't go out to recess until she finished her reading, and she learned to, at the time, hate reading because of it. And another had this beautifully creative mind that there was just no time for. And again, I don't fault the teachers. I'm so grateful for teachers. They just were stuck. They're just stuck in a system where they are not free to do what they want to do, I think, a lot of times. So I started looking for a lot of other options. I looked for charter schools. We tried neighborhood schools. I always offered to homeschool. My children weren't interested in homeschooling. And then I found the book Courage to Grow, which talked about Acton Academy. When Paul and I read it, we were like, this is what we want for our kiddos. But we weren't prepared. We didn't feel like we should make that decision for them. That would be a huge life change, and it would take away. I was a full-time stay-at-home mother at this point, and I loved that. And I realized what it would take away from me as a mother if we started this school. So we just put it away. And my oldest daughter, who was 9 at the time, found the book, and she read it unbeknownst to us, and then came to me and said, Mom, I've got to go to the school. And I said, honey, I'm so sorry there aren't any around here. And she just said, well, we need to start one. And so my husband and I were like, oh, maybe this is what we need to do then. So we just put it in their hands. We said, if this is really what you guys want, here's what it will take from me. This is how your life will change. It needs to be all you kids need to vote. So they did the research. They taught each other about it. And then they voted 5-0 that we started. So I said, okay, we'll do it.
That's awesome. Yeah,
That's
that's way
cool.
cool. So I don't know if you remember, but I'm also a former public school educator, right?
That's
I'm a
right.
elementary teacher and principal, and I agree. Like sometimes, and again, I don't blame the teachers or the principals or whatever, but it's I think it's just the nature of public education that
Yeah.
there's lots of bureaucratic stuff that you have to do in
Yep.
public education that limit your ability to actually do what's best for kids sometimes. And it's
Agreed.
just the nature of the beast,
Yep.
unfortunately. So what makes Choice Academy different from a traditional school?
Where to begin?
And I visited, and I can tell you it's very different for sure. But maybe start with instead, what is an Acton Academy, and then we can go into kind of what makes Choice different from a traditional school.
Well, I was just thinking last night we hosted, we do these community kind of book clubs. It's where we read a book and then there's a discussion and then the learners watch a movie about it. And then after the movie, and they do everything. They run the whole event, they run the discussion. The adults just kind of sit back and watch, which is really fun. And then after the movie last night, the children just went right to work and cleaned up, all this candy and what, like
Awesome.
there's all this food on the ground, crackers and whatnot. And they just went right to work and cleaned it all up. And I thought, this would never happen in a typical school, where they just do it and all the parents just watch them clean up. I mean, I thought that was really unique, and it's great to watch. It makes, it's like, yes, they're responsible and they clean up after themselves. I don't know why it seems so little, but it's almost like an integrity thing that I was seeing, and I'm like, man, these kids are awesome.
Yeah.
Acton Academy flips learning upside down. Rather than being the teacher teaching the students, it's a self-driven, learner-driven education. So we don't have teachers, we're called guides, and our job is to prepare the environment and ask questions and allow the learners to learn themselves. So everything that we do is the learner learning themselves. And when they come and they ask us questions, our responses are things like, what have you tried before? What worked last time? Who could answer this question for you? Where could you find this answer? So it's helping these young people learn how to learn themselves. It's much more focused on learning how to do and learning how to be rather than learning to know. There's so with the internet that the need to learn to know is change. I don't want to say it's obsolete, but it's just changed so drastically. They have all the information that they could ever need at their fingertips. So the question now becomes, what do you do with that, and who are you? But the biggest difference is that learner driven, where the learners they're in charge, they're teaching themselves in a way.
I would say it's also different from self-directed learning in that you're part of a community and you work together to do different games or challenges, and also they create the kind of rules for the school, and so they have this community that it's like a self-governing community, I guess you could say, learning environment.
Yeah, and so that was one of the things that I noticed when we were there is I don't know if you remember, Paul, but when we were walking down the stairs, there was a bunch of kids in the stairwell reading, like they were doing their silent reading there. And like, hey, why are we reading out here? Well, we haven't made the rule about we need to be quiet during that silent reading time yet. And so oh, so what do you think? Like your questions and just that experience of oh, this is a problem. We haven't addressed it as a community. That was actually a pretty interesting aspect for me as an outside observer walking past it. It wasn't like, hey, you can't be here reading, which would probably be something that would happen in my school, right? When I was teaching and stuff, right? No, this is not where we read in the classrooms or whatever. But they solved the problem that it was too noisy themselves.
Well, and they didn't come to an adult and say it's too noisy, right? They know that they're in charge and they know that they're responsible for the rules. So they'll go to town hall on Thursday and write a note about what they need to change and vote on it, and they'll solve the problem themselves. I think something that probably illustrates super well the difference is our middle school right now. almost essentially runs without an adult in the room for most of the day. So I
Yeah.
started with a launch. A launch is just where we give a little intro and then we do a Socratic discussion. So I started most mornings, but more and more the young people are starting to do launches themselves. And then I can leave for the next 4 hours and they set their own goals, they work on their goals, they come back in. Oh, and I always put the schedule up. So I always set a schedule for them. They'll come in, they'll do their own goal check, they'll check on each other, how they did with their goals. They move on to the next thing. I mean, it's really remarkable to watch it function. Adults are so really not needed, which is what we're going for.
What was that one? We had a visitor one time. We had a high schooler come visit.
Oh, yeah.
What did she say?
She said her first comment, she was in the elementary studio and she said, it's so chaotic, but they all seem to know what they're doing. And then as she was leaving and she'd watch the studio maintenance, the cleanup, she turned to her friend. She said, these kids are scarily competent. And we love that.
Awesome.
Both of those were great. There is a lot more chaos because it's young people leading themselves, but they do, and they don't always need the same quiet that adults need, right?
Right.
But then they are, I tell them every day, you are so competent. It's a beautiful thing to watch. They're not perfect, like heaven knows. There's excitement every day, but they are competent and so much fun.
So how do they, I guess I don't really know much about Acton. John obviously visited and knows a little more, but so how do they choose their subjects? Do they choose them together or is it individual, like what they're going to learn?
Good question. So we break the day up into kind of two parts. We have core skills in the morning and then Quest in the afternoon. So Quest is a hands-on narrative that stretches for 4 to 6 weeks. So right now they're doing US geography. And so they have an end goal of planning a 5-city trip, creating a brochure and taking their parents on a 5-city trip. So each day the guide will provide challenges. And so they'll do a launch, then provide challenges and they're all very hands-on and that's more of a group oriented thing. And then the heroes will just complete their challenges. And then when they get stuck, ask each other. So the guide is preparing that ahead of time.
Okay.
When
you say heroes, that's the students, right?
Sorry, forgive me. Yes, our base narrative is The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell. That's common among all Actons. And so rather than calling them kids or students, we really are trying to pound in this idea that they're not victims. They are heroes on their own journey and they can choose what they want to become. So we call them heroes.
Okay.
So forgive me, should have.
No, thank you.
So in the morning is called core skills time, and they each have a math goal. We provide a couple of math programs, but if parents want something different, then they can provide that. That's fine. So they have a year-long math goal they're working towards. They have lifelong reader badges where they're reading different books. We do have a writing program that they can do, and then we have exploratory works, which are kind of mini passion projects where we're just trying to help them find their passions. That's something that we're really focusing on this year, is helping young people find their passions, because when it's something they care about, then they want to read, they want to write, they actually care about it.
And be curious though.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, learning to come up with their own questions. So that morning core skills time, they have all these different things they can work on that are already established, or they can always create their own work if they want to. But we do a lot of goal setting practicing. So they're not just walking in wondering, they have an established routine of setting a goal, making sure their goals in their challenge zone, getting it checked off with their running partner, but they have that freedom to choose any of those things that they want to work on. Our model is really, here's the boundaries and you have freedom within those boundaries. And as they get older, those boundaries get bigger. And even in general, those boundaries are far larger than most places of education.
So is the running partner, is that another student?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's their accountability person. They function as running partners for accountability, and they also have squads and a squad leader. So sometimes it's the squad leader checking off, and so we push all the accountability, all the checking off to them.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
You should say there's no grades, there's no tests, there's no homework unless they really want to go home and do work, which a lot of them do. But that's on their own.
Which seems like if they're following their passions, right, it makes sense that they would go home and then
Yeah, exactly.
keep studying about that. Like our daughter loves art, like our oldest daughter, and so like she will just go and like figure out how to draw new things or how to paint a new thing, right? Because she likes that a lot. And so it's not just this, I think, boxed learning that we sometimes get, right? Is here's the box of what you can learn, but it's a recreation for her as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and the middle school, they set week goals every week. And so we are only 4 days a week. So if they haven't hit their goals, then middle school they usually do 2 to 3 hours on Fridays.
Yeah.
They're at that age and they want to meet those goals for their year. And so they end up doing work at home.
You kind of talked about this a little bit in your kind of introduction about education and stuff like that. But what was that journey like of starting a school? Like, how did that go? Because I mean, it was all smooth sailing, right?
Totally. Totally. No blips. It's one of the scariest things I've ever done and one of the hardest, maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, I had 5 kids in 7 years and that didn't really faze me, truthfully. That was fine. I mean, there were moments, but it really wasn't a big deal. This has stretched me as a human being more than I've ever been stretched because I'm trying to be a full-time mom, which is still my most important job that I'll ever have. But for me right now, being a full-time mom means I'm running a full-time school. So that balancing act of motherhood with employer, accountant, teacher, it's been a lot. It's been a lot. But worth it because every day, I don't know if there's a day that's gone by that my kids haven't said, Mom, thank you so much for doing this for us. They are so excited to go to school every day. And so as a mother, like, what more do you want for your kids? And I've seen them grow in the ways that they wanted to and in the ways that we as parents wanted them to. So as a mother to see that happen, then you do anything for your kids to make that happen. And then you add in all the other families and how I'm hearing from their parents and from them, how it's changing their lives and how happy they are. It just becomes worth it every day.
awesome.
And how is the experience as a teacher? You're a public school teacher, now you're a guy. Like, as a school
how did
teacher,
she transition?
I loved teaching because I loved helping the kids like reach their potential when they could, right? Like I love that aspect of that's why I got into teaching, because I wanted to help kids, right? And so how is that aspect of just being a teacher to a guide, like how has that transition been? And are there things that, like, I don't know, you had to do differently as a guide that would have been different?
Every once in a while I want to like pull my hair out because it is easier to sit down and explain to a child that 49 divided by 7 is 7 and just show them how to do it. It's so much more efficient to just direct, instruct, and teach them that than it is to, where have you learned this before? Who could guide you? I mean, so sometimes it's really frustrating because you think there's a simpler way to do this. But it's the long game that I'm interested in. And it's the long game of empowering them and teaching them, guiding them to know that they can figure it out on their own, they can have the confidence. So while yes, there are times that it's frustrating, what the growth that I've seen in them, again, is totally worth it. It's also been super liberating. I remember when I was a teacher and I taught sophomore biology and I saw all these girls that I was talking to, and I'm sure there were boys too, but it was just the girls that were talking to me, and a ton of eating disorders in my classroom, just a ton. And I thought, I've got to do something about eating disorders. And I went to my principal, and again, not the fault of the principal at all, but there just wasn't room. And there was just no place that's really to fit it in. It's like, that's for health. Health can cover it. You have to cover everything on your core curriculum.
Wow.
So I cheated and I like squished things together and I stuck 2 days of it in there, but it was like pulling teeth to do it. And I just, to have the freedom now to be able to see the needs and then be able to address those is super liberating, and it feels wonderful. If there's a need, there's no timetable that we're on, there's no schedule that we have to follow. We can totally address the needs of these young people. So overall, it's super liberating, mixed in with some frustrations of efficiency that still sometimes can nag at me.
So I guess with that, what's the parental involvement? Because I think because I get nervous with public schools, that was one of my nervous things, that they almost wanted to take the family role too, like on those things, because when I hear eating disorders, I'm like, the family needs to be heavily involved.
Yeah.
That, so I guess that Acton, when you say you can address it, what does it look like?
Such a good question. So our one of our main philosophies is that the family should be the center of a child's life, and thus should be the center of their education. So all decision making, and we're a little bit, I would say we're unique among the Acton community in our push for that. So all decision making is run through the parents. So how many books is your child going to read this year? That's a discussion. You set that goal with your family. How much math is your child going to finish this year? That's a discussion to be set with their family. Are there individual passion projects? Talk with your parents about those. The books, especially as you get into the middle school age, the books that the young people want to read, get your parents okay. It's not my okay that you need, right? That's your parents okay. So we push as much of the decision making that we can to the parents. And our goal is to teach us, okay, the word there, teach the heroes how to think, not what to think. So issues that our goal is to give the good of both sides of the issue. And that's hard when you have strong political opinions about a lot of things, right? But we talk as guides so much that that's got to be our goals. We've got to give the good of both sides or the bad of both sides, and allow them to feel free to take a side and to think about things and to discuss and feel comfortable on either side. As far as some of the issues that are being talked about right now in the schools with gender fluidity and things like that, we absolutely believe they're important issues to be talked about. We just believe they're issues that need to be talked about with the family. That those are family spaces. So if a conversation comes up and it's hero led, we don't stop the conversation. We let them, they need to have those conversations. We don't bleed out on any of those topics. So those are not topics that we introduce. So our goal is to keep parents in the center at all times.
Awesome.
And
I love that. No, I love that, because the family is, because there's many times
It should be.
in other settings where you don't find out about it, or my child will come to me and I'm like, how did that have anything to do with English? Anyway, and a lot of times it was the teacher bringing it up.
So Paul, I'm curious. So on your bio, on your website, it talks about your college and how you really were able to design your own college, and how that actually kind of was something that you wanted for your children. So can you talk a little bit about that journey and kind of how that maybe influenced Choice Academy at all?
Sure. Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was not engaged. I was just there to have fun. And although I had learned about my career when I was 16 years old, and it was always a dream, but I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how it was going to become a reality. And when I got in college, I signed up as an art major. And oh, sorry, my dream job is or was to make facial prosthetics for people who are missing a part of their face. And it's usually cancer patients or whatever. So I started college as an art major. And I quickly learned that was not the best place for me to be if I wanted to be in, science. And, it's like, it was this really unique combination of art and science and technology. And I stumbled across a brochure one day, and the brochure said, design your own major. And I was like, what? This is like, you can do this? And this was at the University of Utah. And most major colleges have a program like this, kind of an individualized major. And they're really designed for a destination, but there's no pathway. So you can design your own major, which means you can take any course you wish at the university with no prerequisites. I mean, it was the best experience I could have ever imagined for education.
Oh, wow.
I got to choose all the classes that I thought would best prepare me for that career. And so I was taking nursing classes and audiology classes and art classes and science classes, social work classes, anatomy classes, plastics processing classes. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And when I did that, I was totally engaged. I was reading textbooks between semesters, and you would never get that in a typical, like, I guess I probably was different than most college kids, but it was just a totally different experience, and I loved it, and I was engaged, and so I got better grades in college than I did in high school, just because I was so engaged and just so interested in the subjects, I guess you could say. So I thought, if you can do that at an earlier stage of life, why would you not?
No,
no,
that's awesome. I never knew about that.
Can I tell a quick story
Yeah, for sure.
from that? So last week, I remember what day it was, I was not in the middle school because they were doing their thing, and I was downstairs helping in one of the younger studios. And I walked up and had 7 different young people come right to me. One of them said, "Well, look at this. I was studying this art history book, and can you see how the painter painted Hebrew letters right on the mountain?" And another one said, "We just finished upholstering our chairs. We're so proud. We're so excited." And another one said, "Look at my Lego. I finally finished building it and coating it." And another one said, "I just decided what I'm going to do for my exploratory work. I'm going to write a play and then have the younger studio perform it." I mean, it was just all this excitement of what they were learning. And I was floating. I was on cloud 9, because I thought, this is what we've been trying to create, is a place where they can do just what Paul said, be so excited about what they're learning about, that they truly are passionate about it, because they have the choice. So that was just a snapshot that I was so excited about.
Well, and
That
just
is
so
awesome.
engaged too. I mean, Paul, you mentioned like you were reading stuff between semesters because you were excited about what you were learning, and it sounds like a lot of the kids will take what they're excited about and go home and continue that. And
That's the hope, right?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you just kind of shared one, Jevonne, the success, but what are some other successes that you see in the lives of children that you both have seen?
I think the joy of that they want to come to school. I think that childhood should be a time of joy, right? We believe childhood should be a time of joy. And so the fact that these heroes want to come to school, we had a week off, and then the first day back, everyone was so excited to be there. And I thought,
Awesome.
this is a moment like we're providing, they get joy in their childhood. And we want that for them. Our younger studio, we haven't talked much about that. It's same philosophy, but a little twist. So they do Montessori in the morning and Reggio in the afternoon. And I walked down one day and for Reggio, during the Reggio time, and they were making plans and then building their plans. And the new tool they had learned was a hot glue gun, and kind of a similar thing, right? But just all of them flooding up to me. "Look at my waterfall, look at my house, and they were so proud of themselves that they had learned how to use a hot glue gun and draw a plan and follow through with it. But they're kind of magical every day. That younger age, just kind of, they're creating a magical every day. A lot of highlights with the individual heroes, right? So my own daughter loves to read now, loves it. I have to pull books away from her hand. And had she been in a place where there was continually forced upon her, I don't think that would have happened. So to watch her develop that love and true passion for reading, such a beautiful thing. One of my other daughters, we were talking about the ways that they've changed or something. She said, "I love to do hard things now. I love to be challenged." And before we started the school, everything was so easy for her at school that anytime she had a slight challenge, it was a full meltdown.
Right.
And I remember thinking, how's she going to function in life if she can't do hard things?
Right.
So to watch her ability to do hard things and to struggle and persevere, that's such a gift. Looking at other heroes at the school, we have one amazing young person who joined us the very first year, and when she came in, didn't speak, was not very happy, at least what she portrayed anyhow. And now she comes into school every day, hi, and shares her opinions every day.
Nice.
And just her ability to express herself and her confidence in 2 years has night and day difference. So I think those are my biggest highlights, is
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
moments like that.
I love it. So who is someone you guys, this is kind of a question we like to ask everyone. Who is someone you admire in history?
I'm not a history expert, so I'm sure
Yeah.
somebody who's a history expert would probably have things to say that I'm going to say wrong. But from what I know, I really admire Abigail Adams. I think that from what I've learned about her, her ability to be a supportive wife, an incredible mother, while also being active in women's rights and in the revolutionary cause, I just think her ability to excel in all of those different roles and to do them well and to do them, and again, I know that she probably wasn't perfect as a mother because she left to go with her husband. So I'm not saying she was perfect, but I really admire her willingness to at least try to balance those 3 different roles, making a difference in all those different areas of life.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting one, because I haven't read specifically about John and Abigail Adams, but I've read, like, the biography about Washington and stuff like that. But they really were like a team, which is something I really admire about them, is that they were working together. Like their goals were the same, and because of that, they were like kind of the nation's first like power couple type of a thing, right? And so Paul, what about you? Who's somebody you admire from history?
There's a lot of people I admire, and people did a lot of really difficult things in the past that I totally look up to. So there's lots of admirations, but one I would say, I know it's a little cliche because she chose a founding family, I guess you could say, but Benjamin Franklin was just such a rich person, but rich in the not money, but his life, or morally, but life was rich, So there were so many interesting things about him, and I admire people who are really diverse and like think differently, and who, I don't know. So there's many interesting things.
Paul also has created an Abraham Lincoln mask and costume so we've been in multiple parades where he dresses as Abraham Lincoln and gives the
I'm an Abraham Lincoln
dress.
fan. I could have mentioned that.
We have an Abraham Lincoln statue at school that he built.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
That's awesome.
So,
That's also another neat story, who was, he was really self-taught. Like he was raised with a single mom, in Kentucky, like in the boonies. And then he aspires to be the president. And, like he tried several times and failed. And, like the perseverance and, I don't know, the determination, I just think is really remarkable. And the whole thing with like his party affiliation and like starting a new party and like, like he just did things differently, and he did what was morally right, and in many scenarios, and just did what he thought was best, and kind of ignored the consequences in some ways, and anyway, so I think he's another person I admire or look up to.
Nice. That is so awesome. Well, Paul and Jevonne, thank you so much for being on our podcast. Besides your website of Choice Academy, how can people kind of follow your work and connect with you if they're interested in learning more about Choice Academy?
Actually, the best place to follow is our website, because we publish a weekly blog about different things.
But our website's the best. Or my phone number's on the website. People can call me, come take a tour.
Oh, I love that. You guys, thank you. I've learned so much.
Thank you for listening to the Diamond Education Podcast.
You can connect with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook
at Diamond Education, DIMOND. or on our website, diamonded.com.